dfwmobile.net user group. It's dfwmobile.net, not dfw.net mobile. We used to meet at the Matrix building. Now we're meeting here at Improving. If you want to follow us on Twitter, that's where we're most active. The website's now out of date by a couple of meetings, so yeah. But there's also the meetup, which is up to date. So yeah, check that out. The link's on the website too if you need to find the meetup. I'm assuming everybody here knows where the meetup is on meetup.com since you managed to get here. This is our leadership team. I'm the only one here today. So was it for these guys, we wouldn't be here. I'm your speaker for tonight as well. Y'all can read the screen, I hope. If you have any questions, I'll have this slide up at the end of the presentation. But if you do, you can always email me or tweet me on Twitter. Try saying that really fast. Tweet me on Twitter. This is the company I work for. They're an awesome company to work for. They're the reasons why I go do user groups, because they push me into doing it. And we're always looking for new employees. So let's talk a little bit about Xamarin. I'm not sure if this is their mission statement, because I think it used to be to delight developers, which is pretty cool. You don't see many companies that are doing that, especially like Apple, which is let's dump whatever we can on the developers, just like Objective-C. But yeah, they're really really focused on making developers happy, which is very rare, it seems, nowadays. So who's here is familiar with Xamarin? Okay, who's here use Xamarin on a project? Who's put a Xamarin app in the store? Okay. All right. So I'm going to cover a little bit about what Xamarin is to give you all a grounding. So Xamarin has multiple products that they offer. They have the Xamarin Platform, which is their SDK for compiling mobile apps. They have their Test Cloud, which allows you to test apps against multiple devices using their UI test. But you don't actually have to use a Xamarin app to use the Test Cloud. You can use any APK or IPA. They have Xamarin Insights, which allows you to monitor your apps. Now you do have to use, well, I guess technically you wouldn't have to if you wanted to reverse engineer their API, but you do have to use Xamarin for at least Android and iOS to use Xamarin Insights. And that's kind of like a Google Analytics, but it's also error tracking, and the error tracking part is free, and it will be free forever. It's really nice. It shows you the stack traces, and it's very .NET-y. I don't know if that makes sense, but you have the stack trace with the line numbers and all the lovely stuff and a bunch of information like your network connection. And then there's Xamarin University, which is their training courses. If you are getting into Xamarin seriously, I would definitely recommend checking out Xamarin University. It's not free. It does cost money, but it is definitely worth it. They do online courses, and it's interactive. It's not just you watch a video, and they actually have you build an app during each course, and they have instructors that will help you if you have any problems during that. So what is the Xamarin Platform? So Xamarin Platform allows you to compile native apps across platforms. So in C#. So if you have experience with ASP.NET, WPF, or any other kind of C#, Xamarin will help you get a head start. Just like any of the other .NET platforms, you still have to learn the platform. You have to know in ASP.NET, you have to know web forms or MVC or web API. In the case of Xamarin iOS, you have to know view controllers, views. but you're still writing it in C#. And the same with Android. You have to know activities, intents, and services, and so on and so forth. So Xamarin has a unique approach to it. So a lot of other cross-platforms that I've messed around with tend to, you write the app once and compile it once, which seems really great, until you look at it on iOS and it looks like an Android app. And that causes a problem because Android app or Android users like their tabs in a certain place, and the same with iOS. And you get a bad user experience because people are not able to find what they're looking for. And bad user experiences in the mobile world quickly lead to uninstalling your app. I think the data shows that if your user is not able to use your app successfully in whatever they're trying to do in 3 seconds, they will probably never use your app again and probably uninstall it, if they even put the effort into uninstalling it. So what Xamarin does is it allows you to write a UI for iOS, a UI for Android, and if you choose to, you can share your mobile backend and write a UI for Windows, whether that's a WPF, universal Windows applications, or Windows Phone, or even Silverlight and such. So in this, that's you would write your view controls, your activities, and your pages. And then the advantage of the shared code comes in when you're writing access to your backend, whether you're accessing a RESTful API or a database, or your business logic and validation code. So you've probably also heard about Xamarin Forms, which allows you to write the UI code once, and it generates platform-specific user interface. So your tabs are in the right place, your labels look right, your entry fields look correct, and you can share that code now. And it's all native. It has native performance. They've made some improvements lately where they pre-compile the XAML, which is really good because before it was not as performant. It was still faster than things like PhoneGap, but it was not as fast as writing straight up Xamarin. So when you're writing Xamarin, you have access to the native APIs. So in the case of Windows, you'd have access to Microsoft.phone, Microsoft.networking, and so on and so forth. And you'd have access to all the .NET SDK. And unlike some other platforms, you have 100% of the API coverage, so you can access all of the iOS API, which is a big deal because some of them don't support that. You can do the same with Android, and both iOS and Android allow you to access all of the .NET framework as well. So anything you can do in Objective-C, Swift, or Java can be done in C# using Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio with Xamarin. And you have the native performance by, in the case of iOS, you have to do ahead of time compiling. If you're familiar with .NET, you do something called JIT, which is just-in-time compiling. But because of the way iOS works, you have to do ahead of time compiling. But in Android, you do JIT. But there is a way to do ahead of time compiling for Android. I've not messed with it, so. And we always have same-day support for platforms. And you can see that we've had same-day support for all of those versions of iOS. And we have full support for all of those devices, which is pretty cool. I have a talk on the website about Apple Watch if you are interested in writing for WatchKit. So how much code sharing are we seeing? Who's seen these apps? iCircuit, TouchDraw, anyone? Supposedly they're very big apps in the store. They're pretty cool. They're both in Xamarin, obviously, and these are how much code sharing is going on. The blue here is shared C# code, which means I don't have to write it, with the silo approach of having it written in Android and then rewriting it for iOS and then rewriting it for Mac or Windows. So let's get to Sketches. I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing about Xamarin every time you come, but here's Sketches. So when you create a sketch, you create a new file. It's a Sketches file. And it's going to have 3 parts of the page: the code editor, the evaluation results, and the output and analysis. And Sketches is a REPL, a read, evaluate, print, and then loop. Who's seen REPLs in other platforms? I know a really big popular one is like a Firebug and Chrome Inspector in the console. You can write, read, evaluate, and print. And then Swift has one now. So let's start out with a demo. I've pre-written this one. I want to make it available on GitHub after the meeting. Nobody likes to watch me live code because I make lots of mistakes. They've got IntelliSense in here, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. It's not as good as writing a real app. So the IntelliSense, there's some lacking things in here. So the Sketches file is similar to, let me show you the file name. This is a clever little thing. I just noticed this today. In fact, I didn't actually notice it before. It's Sketch CS is the extension. I always thought it was Sketches because it's called Sketches, but it's not. And this is the file name. So if you were to create your own Sketches file, you don't have to have a solution for it. You go to File, New, File, and you can expand the C# or F#, or maybe not. Okay, apparently it's not supported in F# anymore. You go to the Sketches section. Instead of like going to iOS or Android, you go to Sketches. So it's not underneath the platform. It's underneath Sketches. And then you can select which platform you want to create a sketch for. They currently support Android, iOS, and Mac. And then you can also do one for Xamarin Forms, which automatically includes those libraries for Android or iOS. And you can put this in your solution. You can put it anywhere you want. I've noticed a little problem with it, though, is that it's not. Okay, now it's going to prove me wrong. Okay, well, in the past, it may just be because it's open or because I'm presenting in front of a group of people, I'm not sure which, it typically wouldn't show up in recent files. Yeah. Grr! Proving me wrong. Okay. So if you create a new one, you'll start out with these 3 namespaces. In the case of iOS, you'll have different namespaces in the case of Android. For today, I'm just going to do the iOS, just for simplicity's sake. I included an additional namespace. One of the first things you'll notice is that there's no class. So Sketches has no class. So you just start out writing whatever code you want. In this case, I created a variable and assigned it a string. And so it evaluates to this, hello DFW mobile. Okay. And so this is the evaluation section, and this is the output and analysis. If I want to add it to the timeline, I can click and add it over there. That's not really a big deal for the string, but it'll become more important later on. I'll go ahead and remove it. And then there's always the console output. So if I want to write line, and then the console output shows up over here. And I don't even have to assign it to a variable, and it shows up in the evaluate. Is everybody following me so far? Now this seems kind of like really basic. What am I going to do with this? Well, I was working in a project the other day, and I was trying to make a variable show up in an entry field as a dollar with a dollar sign, the currency, right? Using string format. So let's just say string.format. Are y'all familiar with string format? Okay. Oh, and this is something I really love about Xamarin is you get the yes, happiness. That's just I'm like awesome. Yeah. All right. So there's my format string. Bam. Right. I'm like, okay. $44. That looks right. So I'm like, well, why isn't this working in my app? I mean, it works here, right? So I played around with my app for a while, put some breakpoints in, and then I finally realized it's a string, not an integer. So this is a really great tool for figuring out why your app doesn't work. I don't know about y'all, but I've written or created a lot of console applications to test like 3 or 4 lines of code. That's really annoying when I've got console application 23 and 24 and 25, and I'm trying to remember which one I fixed that line of code in. So that's a really great use for sketches, and it's not just for little things like string format. So let's hop back over here for a second. So there's some known issues. I'm going to put this at the beginning, or well, not quite at the exact beginning. There's some known issues. You can't create a class or an anonymous type. So Xamarin recommends you use a tuple or a function delegate. I would recommend if you want to have a class that's more than just a couple of properties or a few properties, that you create a .NET library. So that's a lot easier. And I'll show you how to load that in a second. If then else statements may result in an error because it does evaluate line by line. I'll hop over here really quick. See, normally that would work. It doesn't like, if you didn't catch that, I just put a break. So it does line by line. Android only works with the Xamarin Android player. I don't have a problem with that because I really like the Xamarin Android player. You may not like it. It's pretty fast. Yeah, only when you have problems installing it. Once it's installed, it's great, at least in my experience. So the 64-bit APIs don't work, so no scene kit yet. And it only works in Xamarin Studio. You can't do it in Visual Studio. I haven't really found a good use for it, but you can graph the data that you're messing with. There's a couple of ways to do it, and I'll show you here in a second. So let's look at that. Yeah, let me show you this first. One problem with this is that if you have an error, right, it shows you the error. Most of the errors make sense, but I can't do anything after the error. right? It doesn't execute the code after the error. Once it hits the error, that's it. And that goes the same with exceptions. You can actually expand that item for more detail. All right, so let's go back to what we were talking about. So graphs, if you're ever wondering what's happening in a loop, you can pop that over here with a watch, and you can show what the value at each place. Not the best example of why you might want to look at this data, but you can actually pop in markers here to see each increment in the loop. And you can play through it, and it should show you, show you a little line, if that helps you. You can also choose to capture value, which gives you a little more control over what you're putting into the graph. And it gives you a little title up here. You probably can't read that. That's not because you're sitting watching a projector. It's because it's really small and you can't see that on your screen anyway. I wish they'd fix that, but it is what it is. And so what I did to generate that is I have an array of a bunch of numbers. And I'm doing a bubble sort. I'm sure if y'all have done computer science, engineering, whatever degree, you've had to do a bubble sort. They're kind of the staple of computer programming learning. It's like the see Jane run. So in order to capture that, I'm using this function called capture value, and I'm passing it a value. I couldn't get this to work earlier. Let's see if it'll work for me now. But you can, of course not. Yeah, you can do things besides graph it. You can capture the values like that, and you can see at each iteration what your array looks like. So that could be useful if you're writing some kind of sorting algorithm or not wanting to use a SQL query or something. You could write a comparator. So I'll comment that out. All right. So you can preview colors and UI elements. This is really when it gets useful for me. So I do a lot of, oh, well, that button doesn't look good. Let's see how it looks here. Or let's see if it's a little longer, or tweak it by a few pixels. That gets really annoying when it's like the third screen on the, the third flow or whatever, and you have to go through, type in your username, your password, hit enter, go to this page. Oh, that pixel width doesn't look right. That's really annoying, and the compile time on top of it doesn't help. So now you can throw your UI elements into a sketch and try it out. So, okay, my slide told me to say said demo, so now I can do my demo. All right, so let's look at colors. It gives you a little preview of what it looks like. So if you're trying to tweak your colors to make them look better, you can pop them in here. You can expand the detail and have this additional information. So if you're also doing a website and you want the hex colors, this is an easy way to do it besides opening the calculator, setting it to decimal, typing the number in, and then switching it to hex. At least that's what I've done in the past because I'm kind of lazy. You can also hold on. You can click the add watch, and it shows up over here. And to get rid of it, you can hit the X. So let's. So UI elements. So let's say I wanted a label. And for you, if you're not familiar with the iOS and Xamarin, most of the elements start with UI. It's kind of annoying. It's like, what other label are you going to have, right? What other button are you going to have? Are you going to have a SQL button? Yeah. An abstract button? I don't know. And you have to provide the frame size. When I was first messing with Sketches, when it first came out, I kept creating a label, and I didn't know why it didn't show up when I moused over the preview. You have to provide the CG rect, the frame size, or it's going to be 0000. Something else to note if you haven't messed with Xamarin iOS, you can't change the width. So let me show you. So label dot frame. It's not working. IntelliSense works kind of well. I don't know what it's IntelliSensing for, but so you can't set the width this way. You have to set the frame. That's just something to do with the way it works. I don't know. So I provided, the text color. Make sure you provided the text color. It'll be white. And if you want to show them side by side, you can just do label again, set the text color, and then label, and it'll push out to the evaluate, which you can assign to the output and analysis for side-by-side comparison. Did I have a slide for that? No. Let's get rid of the labels. So if you want to check out images as well, you can put an image in there, provide an absolute path, and do a UI image from file. And Captain Picard can give you a funny look. Or you can also use the from bundle. So if you're familiar with using iOS apps, you try to access from bundle. It's a lot less complicated than when you're including an app, or a file in an app, an image in an app, as opposed to writing it to your local storage in the app. So one thing to note when you're using Sketches, since you don't have an app, you have to kind of create a fake bundle. And in order to do that, you have to do the file name, which in this case, and it doesn't have to be Sketches. It could be whatever you name it. I originally tried to create the file as sketches.ios.extension. For some reason, it decided to cut the iOS out of the file name. So that's just something to think about. So don't name it Sketches and tend to have more than one Sketches because it'll remove any dots. But in order to have a fake bundle, you have to have in the same directory as the file itself, the file name .resources as a folder, and you put your resources for the bundle in here. So here's my kirk.jpg. Okay. If you're messing with Sketches and for some reason it's not showing the image, it's just not doing anything, or it's throwing a null error, you might have to restart Xamarin Studios because it doesn't recognize that the bundle is there. For some reason, it doesn't auto-detect it. So just close the application or the screen and open it again, and it should work. And then this is our kirk.jpg from bundle. Any questions about that? Okey-doke. And just so you'll know that the UI image isn't what you show in the app. It's a UI image view, and that's why I'm not having to provide a frame. So I would have our image view equals new UI image view, and then I could provide it with the frame. Why does it? So it works there. Doesn't like it when I put the parentheses in it. And anyway, all right. So I'd provide the frame and then provide the image to that view. I don't know what a good comparison would be too. All right, so that's it for previewing UI elements. So the next thing, so I mentioned earlier, if you want something more complicated, like in a class, besides a couple of properties, you want to provide your own DLL, and you load it in by getting using the load assembly method. There is no IntelliSense for this method name, so you have to make sure you spell it correctly, or it's going to throw an ugly error, and then you're going to wonder what's going on. All right. It also has to be in your bundle, which we just talked about, and you provide get resource path, so you don't have to figure out the path to your bundle. Now, let's back up here. This folder, this resources folder, isn't where your bundle really is. This is where it's loaded from. So it's copied somewhere else when it executes your code. And it's this really long URL or URI right here. So you don't want to have to type that out. So that's what get resource path gets you, is that long URL from your bundle. And you do have to use a using statement. And I know this is crazy, but I'm having a using statement not at the top of my document. You do have to load the assembly before you call the using statement if it's not a part of the .NET or Xamarin iOS, or in the case of a Xamarin Form Sketches. All right. And in this case, I'm instantiating this class, and I'm calling a function of that class. And it says, all work and no play make Sean a very dull boy. Or you could do whatever you want with the class. And it's just a normal class. I'll load up another instance of Xamarin Studio here and show you what's actually in here. So that, yeah, it's nothing special. I don't have to put any attributes or anything crazy to make it work with Sketches. Any questions about that? All right. And you can do it with other libraries too, not just ones you create. So I'm using the Newtonsoft JSON, which is either the first or second most downloaded library on NuGet. If you start getting into libraries that have dependencies, I haven't messed with that much. It's not pleasant. And make sure if you try to test serialized object, you don't use an anonymous type. I did that when I was trying to make this presentation, and I'm like, well, why isn't Newtonsoft working? This is supposed to work. And then I realized, oh, I can't use an anonymous type. I can use an anonymous array, apparently, though. Maybe they'll have support for it later. All right. So testing in the simulator is a little different. You have to add your UI elements to a parent element, obviously. In the case of iOS, you want to add it to the root view. If you're using Xamarin Forms, you want to use the root page. If you're familiar with Xamarin Forms, the root page is actually a tabbed page. So you have to access children and then add and so on. And in the case of Android, we're going to use root activity. So let's go to the demo. Oh, let's go to the demo, Sean. So like I mentioned before, this is an UI image view. And I'm passing in the image from a bundle. And I'm providing the frame. In this case, I'm taking half the frame width of the root view and subtracting half the width of the image, so it centers on the screen. And then I'm adding it to the root view. If you've messed with iOS, you can also do add, which is really just calling add subview. One of the things that you have to take IntelliSense for these root elements. I would recommend if you're planning on doing sketches in a simulator, you pull up the Xamarin document and you pull up Xamarin Sketches documentation because you will probably forget, like I do almost every time I create a sketch, what exactly am I trying to add it to? And it will be very frustrating because like I've done root view. No, that doesn't. Add it to the root. No, but it's root view. So IntelliSense doesn't work for that, but it works for other variables inside your sketch. So. And there it is. So whenever you create a sketch and it runs for the first time, it'll open the simulator. In the background, it won't pop up. So if you're wondering why, like when you hit run in Xamarin Studios, it automatically pops up the simulator most of the time if, you know, the stars align and the moon's in the right phase. Yeah, so you'll find it in the background. If you ever crash the sketches, it will restart your simulator automatically. If you manage to crash Xamarin Studio using sketches, that takes real talent. Or you're getting ready for a presentation, one of the two. It decided to crash on me quite a bit today. It's never crashed on me before, but it decided to crash on me because it knew I was going to present in front of a bunch of people. Yeah, so here is our lovely simulator. Have any questions about that? Does anybody want to see anything? Yes.
Sorry, I came late. I don't know if you guys ever discussed that. Can you do Xamarin Forms syntax in the script? See how
So yeah, so you're going to want to create a file, new file. That's kind of redundant, but sketches, and let's see if you can see that. So there's multiple options. You could try to include Xamarin.forms in your Xamarin.iOS sketch or Xamarin Android.sketch or Xamarin.Android sketch. I wouldn't do it. I would just create the Xamarin form sketch. And then no, it does not. It does not let you use XAML, if that's what your question is.
That's what I was trying to do. I was hoping that I can use this.
Yeah, you have to use. So this is the Xamarin Form one. The really cool thing about it is you can actually switch the platform. And yeah, I'm not going to do that during a presentation because then I loaded an emulator. And you can access the hello computer root. So I'm going to check my slides. Like I mentioned, you never want to do this without checking, since there's no IntelliSense. Root page dot children dot add new content page content equals new label text. This is why I don't do live coding. No. Let's see, need another bracket, parentheses, and semicolon. And let's see if this loaded. So there it is. So yeah, you'd have to do the straight up code to do it. You can't do XAML. For everybody else who might not be familiar with Xamarin Forms, you can actually write XAML to generate the UI, which is kind of a neat thing. It's not as good as writing XAML for like WPF or Silverlight or Windows Phone. They've got some room for improvement, but you might be able to compile your Xamarin Forms project, grab the DLL, and then load the assembly and then test it. But that would be, I mean, you'd be copying DLLs around. It's not ideal.
Maybe we can just do it on C#.
Yeah, you could basically do your XAML in C# and instead. It's not as pretty. See if that works. This is line by line. Oh, it didn't blow up. Imagine that. And I'm presenting. Okay. Is there any other questions? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Or you can add the gradients and other things that you XAML specific things. You can do it in code behind, but I don't know if it's in Android.
I would yeah, I would think so. I don't know how to do the gradients right offhand. I'd have to look it up. So you mean like with a brush, a gradient brush?
Right.
Yeah, I can't think of how to do that offhand. I mean, I could try if you want to walk me through it, but I would recommend playing with it and seeing what you can do with it. I mean, you don't have to install anything as part of Xamarin Studio. Are you using Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio? Okay.
But I cannot take the XAML to me, so
Right. Okay. Yeah, that would not be ideal. If it's something that you're interested in seeing them do, make sure you let them know on the forums. And I mean, the only way they're going to do it is if they know people are interested in seeing it, right? So make sure you give them feedback. They are pretty responsive to feedback. I mean, they
I mean, they're changing. The first time the forms came, I think most of their help articles were off C# generated screen layout.
mm-hmm.
Most of their examples. Nowadays, I see those examples being changed.
Right. Yeah, they're definitely moving towards XAML, so especially since they are now pre-compiling it better than it used to be. Everybody would be like, well, should I use Xamarin Forms for my production app? And I'm like, just wait a little bit. It'll get better. All right. So are there any other questions? It is not supported in Visual Studio. No, it's unfortunately not.
I only use Xamarin Forms when crap is breaking in Visual Studio, or to fix Visual Studio, or fix working project files so Visual Studio will open again.
Something I want to point out, there is this toolkit thing over here that lets you switch between UIKit activities in the case of Android. I don't recommend switching. It doesn't do well. It tends to just go boom. So I'd have a Sketches file for each toolkit / platform you'd want to use. And I'd make more than one, because you might want to go back and look at what you've done before. And even if I'm not adding something to the simulator, it does need to use the simulator. So it is actually running. What did I do to mess up this file? Bless you.
Thank you.
Anyway, let's get rid of that. So this is actually running in Xamarin, or is actually running on the device. Wrong button. And it's this little installed app right here. So you know it is actually running in the simulator. It's not just running in mono. So it is performing the way it would perform on a device, or at least on the simulator. But
So does it start off with Android emulator and
so if I'm using just iOS, it's going to run the iOS simulator. If I create a Sketches for Android, it's going to try to run Xamarin Android Player, which I think I removed my all of my emulators. So it would run my whatever emulator I have.
So in the one that you had for iOS, could you not just pick a different platform, or was Android not available?
So yeah, you do have all the different platforms like I recommended. I don't recommend switching the sketches between, unless you're doing Xamarin Forms.
Which you are right now, right?
This is my Xamarin Forms is right here.
Okay.
So yeah, you just switch, and it would load up the emulator, and it would run it on that emulator. So it'd be nice if you could run them on both emulators at the same time. That would be cool. But they don't support that.
Future support.
Yeah, future support. Who here has gotten the T-shirt? So you can get a free T-shirt from Xamarin by going to xamarin.com/T-shirt.